In this example, let's see how we can use a query and some conditional formatting and using a query in a special way to come up with a sheet that would take a look at our data set that we have over here. We have this data set right here, and we want to compare our different reps and see how they compared one to another. There'd be a bunch of ways you could do this, but this is an interesting way showing how you might use some queries in an interesting way. So let's see how I did this. I'm going to, first of all, I'll just duplicate this here on this same sheet. So the first thing I did was come over here and I made a data validation from a range. So a range, and the data range we're going to select is back here. We're going to select these sales reps. Say OK to that, save, and then come back and look. And so now I have a drop-down menu with those, and I can simply copy that across. So I can now compare these two names. So that was the first thing that I did over here. And then the next thing is that we wrote a query, and we had to add a couple things, but we started with a simple query, which is basically equals query. And then the data that we're using is this data set over here. And then we are going to select. And we're selecting the sum of F. And let's just hit enter and see what that gets us. Well, it gets us this 8844. And that's just the total sum of all of F. And what I didn't like about that was that it gave me the header. And this is one of those situations where you can put in a 0 for the header, and it gives you the aggregate. It drops the word sales, but it still gives you the aggregate. So I then decided I would label sum F with a blank. Oh, and that gave me an error. And I can see my error is right here. Label sum F blank, and we need to move that over there. And sometimes what I do with this is just I try to separate those things off so they're a little clearer. So that's the sum of all of the data. And then what I really wanted to do was to just sum F where column C is equal to what I have in F1. Now notice you can't just add F1. You have to do the single quote, double quote, ampersand F1, followed by the ampersand, double quote, single quote. And now I get what I'm after, which is simply the amount of money that Brown earned. And I should be able to drag this across, and yes, I can. And notice that's because G1 became, because of the relative referencing, that changed to G1. So in this example, I'm demonstrating how to build this up by pieces. So this query gives me Brown. So I can go ahead and copy this. And then I should be able to paste this right here. I get my 2688. And what I really want to do is come to this query. I don't want the equal sign. I want to copy that. Oops, I don't want to add that in there. Sometimes if you don't hit the enter key and get out of there. So now I have this, and I want to minus that second query that I copied. And now I should have the difference between these two. That query brings me Brown, that query brings me Johnson, and this query brings me the difference between the two. And then finally, I wanted to wrap this in an if statement. So if that first query, if the first query is greater than, so I should be able to paste my query. So if the query G1, so this is going to be if F1, and then I should be able to do a greater than and go ahead and paste. And in this case, it's greater than G1. So if F1 is greater than G1, or the sum of those, yep, G1's there, then I want it to be, let's just do it a simple one, greater than, or else we do less than, and then we finish out our if statement. So that's greater than, but let's do Brown, we know is the big one, and Johnson, now we notice that changes to less than. So I basically did that query, but then I wanted to have this do a little bit more complex, so I'll go ahead and copy this, and then I should be able to go ahead and paste. Well, let's see. No, these references would change. I think. Let's see what happens. Okay, Brown earned 23.28 more. So again, I think it's comparing. If I do it this way, if I do it that way, it's going to compare not this one. It's going to compare this one. And you can see how that's still tied to that. So I'd have to change that, but I didn't want to take the time to write all that. So what we're doing here is that if this query 1 is greater than query 2, then the output, we're taking A1 with an ampersand, we're taking the name, ampersand, earned, and then we're adding in earned, the $, adding in the query. That's the query that is the difference query, this guy. And then we're and more than, and then we're adding that in there, and then earned, and then we're coming into the other part of the if statement, the non-true if statement right here, A1 earned, in this case less than Brown. So let's just go to a different person, Martinez. And again, because we copied this over here, what we would have to do is change all the A1s in this to F1 and all the B1s to G1. And a real quick way to do that, by the way, is simply to do this. We should be able to do that with, on a Mac, a Command-Shift-H brings us up the find replace. So what I'm looking for is I don't want to change that A1 colon, I want to change A1 ampersand. And I believe anytime I'm using those references, I'm using an ampersand. So I'm going to say A1 ampersand needs to change to, in this case, F1 ampersand. Let's see if that's going to work for us. We're going to search within formulas, and we are going to actually not do all sheets. I just want to do a specific range, and I just want to do this range I'm in right here, this one formula here. And then I replace all, and it found 5 instances, and I should be able to say done to that. Oops. I still had another one to do, so now I want to find B1 ampersand and change that to G1 ampersand, and search within formulas, and we're still just working with not all sheets, we're just working with a specific range. Sheet 2 F3, we're going to change that and replace all. I found 3 instances, done, and Brown earned 23.90 more than Brown. Something's not right there. But we do have the 1426. Let's take a look at our formula and see where that mistake is. And I can see that our in this second statement here, it's actually G1 earned less than. So this should have said G1. And now Brown earned more than Brown. Still not quite right. Let's stop and figure this out. To make this easier to read and solve that problem, I see that the two G1s I had to change were here. I went ahead and used the control return function on a Mac to break these down into lines. So if this query, comma, this is the true output, comma, this is the false output, and then ending the if statement. So now I think that should work. Let's see. And Brown earned more than Rodriguez, and then if I change this to Martinez, Martinez earned less than Rodriguez. So just another simple way, and then in this example, I've just applied some conditional formatting so that I could turn that. Just a way to sort of extend the use of a query. This one might be a little bit contrived, but you can see how you could build an output, and these were kind of helper cells, so the whole output could just be something like this, where you could show Brown earned that much more money than someone. So just an interesting way to apply query in a different manner.